In this video, we're going to cover a powerful tool in Modo called a Boolean. And if we look in the tools properties, if we go to Mesh Edit, down here under Commands, this little guy called Boolean. So let's open up his properties. So I'm just going to hit F1 and just click on this and bring up the online help. So the first question is, what is a Boolean? And the answer to that is it's pretty much combining multiple meshes in various ways. And those ways are union, intersect, subtract, and add. So easiest way to kind of visualize this is to look at this image down here. So realistically, when you're doing a Boolean, most of the time you're going to deal with at least two meshes, if not more. So in this example, our active mesh is going to be a sphere, or for this demonstration, just a circle, and our inactive mesh is going to be the square. So again, that's why this one's called base. And then a union is going to be when that active mesh and the inactive mesh kind of combine together and all of their vertices edges are welded, so it becomes one piece. An intersect is going to be where the two objects intersect. These areas on the outside are going to go ahead and be deleted. Subtract is going to do exactly what you'd think. It's going to subtract the background mesh from the foreground mesh. And then add and union are going to be really similar. The main difference being add, it's going to keep the inner geometry of both. So again, we have this inner box corner and we have this inner kind of quarter of a circle. If we look over here, it has a dotted line, meaning it's going to remove those areas. So let's go ahead and take a look at what these look like in 3D. In this scene we have a box and we have a sphere. If I look at the meshes up here, let's just rename this guy real quick. Box. So again, just some quick terminology. The mesh that you have selected up here, that's going to be your active mesh. That's the one that, again, I can grab the polygons, I can move those around. The mesh that isn't selected right here is going to be the inactive mesh. So whatever I do, I can't select this guy. I can visually change how he looks. Again, I can hit the O key, go to inactive mesh, and now I can change him to make him default so he looks the same. But again, he's still not selectable. He's an inactive mesh. So just so we can see what's going on, I'm going to change this back to wireframe. So again, our inactive meshes are going to be in a wireframe view. So to perform one of these Boolean actions, a number of conditions need to be met. So one, we have both an active and an inactive mesh, and these two meshes need to be penetrating each other. So again, if I was to try to do a Boolean operation in this case, they're not actually intersecting in any way, so nothing would really happen. So again, we're going to have the box as our active mesh, the sphere as our inactive mesh. I just want to grab this sphere, zoom in, look at this from the side. I'm just going to bring him in right there so he's intersecting. If I make both of these meshes visible, I can see he's kind of penetrating through, but he's just kind of going through this face. So I have my box selected. I want that to be the active one, and I'll have no polygons or elements selected. So again, no vertices, polygons, edges. He's just completely deselected. I'm going to go over here, hit Boolean, click on him, and I get this menu right here. So this operation, this is going to be, remember the four different things I had up: union, intersect, subtract, and add. Those are the operations we can do. In the drive mesh, that's just what do we want to kind of say is, again, the mesh that we're using as our effector. So again, it's set to background. We could have this set to last selected if we had multiple meshes in the scene. If it would get a little bit more, it would be a little more confusing with more meshes. So if you do have more, you can change it to this and do a last selected, but for this demo, I'm just going to leave it on background. So again, subtract from the background. Our foreground mesh is the box. Let's hit OK and see what happens. Click. We see a little hole pop into this. So let's go ahead and turn off this sphere. And now we can see that the sphere got cut out from the box mesh. So let's fully analyze what happened here. So we have our original box mesh. Again, this is here. The sphere got subtracted from it. That's pretty easy to understand. Let's turn this mesh off, and now let's look at just our sphere over here. So this was the effector that kind of modified the box, but if I look at this guy, nothing has really changed for him. So again, whenever we do a Boolean operation, in our case, our affected item is going to be our selected item, the box, and our effector, which was this sphere, whatever operation we do, nothing is going to happen to this effector item. It's just there kind of as a reference. And then what's going to change is the box that was selected. So let's hit undo a few times, get back to kind of where we were. Let's do this again. So let's grab the sphere, click him. Now let's move him up into the corner. So now instead of just affecting one polygon, he should be affecting this face, and this face. So let's go ahead and do that same operation. Boolean. Again, we have the box selected. Sphere is our background mesh. Subtracting from the background, so we're subtracting the sphere. Hit OK. It gets subtracted. Go ahead and hide the sphere so we can see what's going on. Now we can see exactly where the sphere was cut out. So again, if I look right here, this is kind of where that pole of that sphere was, and over here was a little bit more clean geo. So this is something you need to take into consideration when you're subtracting one mesh from another. Because again, this guy right here, if I look at just him, he's going to be one big n-gon now. So again, if I triangulate him, he could triangulate in a whole slew of different ways. But doing back to where we were, just know that whatever you're selecting from, there's multiple ways that it can kind of get subtracted. So let's backtrack all the way back to the beginning. We'll do two different examples of this. So let's go to the top view real quick. Just move him to right here. Just centered him real quick. And let's do that. So this is the front. And I actually want to do this twice. So let's grab this, copy paste, and move over. So we're going to have kind of two different things going on. I want to have my spheres in the sphere mesh and my boxes in the box mesh. So we have a setup like this: boxes, spheres. So what I'm going to do different with this one is I'm going to take this guy and rotate him so he's going up this way. This one I'm going to leave like this. So again, the intersection of this guy is going to be happening, go to the side view, oops, come on, this side. It's going to be kind of cutting through right here. This one though, if we look at it, just kind of line up this edge, it's going to be cutting through a series of polygons. So let's go ahead and do this Boolean operation and see what the difference is here. So Boolean subtract from background, hit OK. We'll go ahead and hide the sphere mesh. So if I look again, these edges were never affected, they're just normal. Same thing with these ones over here. And again, this one, both of these, if I just itemize them, they're going to be just big huge n-gons that I'd potentially have to clean up. Let's look at the hole that got cut. This one right here, again looking at our sphere, from the front it was facing us, so these polygons kind of get plunked out right in here, and it kind of leaves us with a clean hole that has multiple rings. And then this one rings all the way around. If I look at this one though, again if we look at the sphere, the poles are on the top and the bottom. So this we were cutting out kind of a weird section of a sphere. So now instead of getting a nice series of circles, I get a bunch of square polygons, but on the edges here I get a combination of n-gons. We have n-gons here, triangles here, quads here. It pretty much leaves us with a little bit nastier of a hole. So when you're cutting one thing from another, you want to kind of keep in mind the thing that you're cutting from. What way is it oriented, and is there a cleaner way to cut it through? Because again, having this full loop all the way through that gets cut, leaving this ring that goes all the way around is going to be a little bit cleaner than this scenario. So if we look at these, toggle verts on, and I look at it from a front view, this one over here, and again this was the one that had the pole facing the hole that we were cutting out, it has perfectly spaced vertices going all the way around here. So, oops, I'm gonna grab that last one. Loop these around. So again, we got 24 edges. Looking at the sphere, double click, 24 edges, matches up pretty good. If I look at this one though, we no longer have close to a perfect circle. We have kind of a big gap, oops, right here, a little gap here, an even bigger gap here, a little gap, big gap, a couple consistent gaps, and then we're going back to big gap, little gap, big gap, little gap, back to consistent ones. So you can see this right here is a much cleaner hole that got cut out than this hole right here. So again, just keep that in mind when you're cutting one thing from another. You want to make sure that it's kind of oriented in the best way that you can make it to make your cut kind of have, again, evenly spaced areas throughout. So in this next example, what I'm going to do is the same scenario. We have a box and we have a sphere. But what I'm going to do different with this sphere is it's going to be a quad ball, but I'm going to subdivide it. So I just hit the tab key on there. So again, now, our poly count jumps up. Now we're at almost 800 for just the sphere. So let's go ahead, turn this mesh on, and do this operation. So jump to deform. Oops, I'm sorry, mesh edit. Do a Boolean. We're going to subtract from the background. Hit OK. And now let's look at what we got for a result. Let's turn off the sphere that we had. So now down here it says Polygons Mixed. So we're getting a combination of polygons that are subdivided, these guys, and polygons that are unsubdivided, or these guys. So if I go ahead and select these polygons, hit tab, what it's going to do is now everything's set to face. So pretty much what this did was it subdivided this guy right here, but it grabbed these polygons, hit tab on them, now they're subdivided. So now I have part of my mesh that's unsubdivided, part of it that's subdivided. So ideally what you want to do is not be Booleaning things that are subdivided. So again, real quick example, this just shows you what it does. Kind of your big tip-off is this guy will say mixed, and chances are there's going to be some type of a gap between here. So different example, okay, I have my box, cleared out the sphere, let's just delete his mesh, jump over to this basic tab. Now I just want a default sphere, so I'll hold down shift, click that sphere. So this guy, he just pops right into the scene. He's the default number, rings around, but you can see he comes in subdivided. So let's go ahead and turn verts off. So if let's delete him out and redo this. So left click, hover over the 3D viewport, my sides and segments, these are all default, right click. Since there's so many edges going around here, I initially might not notice that this guy comes in subdivided. Again, your default sphere should come in subdivided. So again, down here, polygon type set to subdivs. Ideally, you want to change that to face, but whenever you drop a default shape, it kind of pops back. Same thing with the torus, that's going to come in default subdivided. So if I didn't know that this was subdivided, and I rotated it, pulled it out, shrunk it down, just make sure that there's not any intersection here. Now I have a subdivided face. Let's do the same thing, mesh edit, Boolean, subtract from background, okay. Turn the sphere off. Now looking, if I zoom in on it, I can see, oops, that's a little bit better. I can see that this gap is made because again, we have an unsubdivided face, and then all these would be subdivided faces. So the easiest way to select these would just be grab 2 or 3 in a row, L to loop, hold the shift arrow, hit up a few times. So again, all these polygons right here are subdivided. Unhide, it says mixed because again, these guys aren't divided. So this would be something that if I was doing something and I just made a little tiny hole in a bigger object, I might not know that some parts are subdivided and some aren't. So just keep that in mind whenever you drop default shapes. See if they're subdivided or not. Constantly check here to see if this is mixed, because again, you shouldn't be doing Boolean operations of subdivided objects, aside from just turning your polygon type to mixed, so you have kind of holes in your mesh here and there. The other thing that it could potentially do is cause Modo to crash. So again, we have another example. We're doing a box. We have a mesh that's called sphere. There are 2 spheres that I just kind of stretched. Just showing off, again, I can have 2 separate objects. So Boolean, subtract from background, hit OK, close these guys out, and again we have cut out of the back, cut out of the front. Again, 2 n-gons here, and it works out just fine. So another similar scenario real quick, I just off camera split these into 2 separate objects. So now again we have our selected mesh, so this is our active mesh. These guys being 2 different background meshes. Same thing, Boolean subtract from background, hit OK, Turn both of these guys off, and again we get a similar result, left and right. Undo that and bring it back. Looking at our box, let's go ahead and turn sphere 1 off. So again, it's still there, it's just not an technically it's an inactive mesh, but it's not visible anymore. So let's now try it. Boolean subtract from background, hit OK, and we get nothing over here, but this side Booleans out. Because again, even though we were doing an operation where we were subtracting from the background, this mesh wasn't visible, so Modo didn't see that mesh. Again, the little eyeball was turned off, it was turned off. So if I wanted to, I could turn this mesh on, turn this guy off, because again, we already have the hole in here. Have our box selected, do another Boolean operation, subtract from background, hit OK. It's going to cut out just fine. And again, nothing changes over here. So again, if your meshes are on or off, toggling their visibility affects whether they do or don't get included in the operation. So with this example, what I'm going to do is right now I have kind of the exact same thing. We have this sphere that's been stretched, lined up. So again, this edge kind of wraps around perfectly with its intersection. But this one down here, I just have these in separate groups. I'm going to grab him, look at him from the side. Let's actually turn this group off. So what I want to do is I want to rotate this so this edge is kind of going through a cross section of this edge that's going up and down. So let's rotate him from here, do something like this. So again, we're going to get a similar result. It's just this edge is kind of coming through at a diagonal, whereas this one is coming through at a clean edge. I'm just going to compare these real quick. So again, since I have, let's go ahead and turn this one on. Since I have multiple meshes going on, let's do these one at a time. So we'll deal with group 1 first. Box, doing our default Boolean, subtract from background, turn off the sphere, go ahead and grab this one, turn these on, turn this one off, and perform that same operation. Let's go ahead, hide the spheres, and these boxes. Just pair these together. We'll do a quick comparison. So again, this is our good one, the one that we expect. This ring comes around. If we look at it from the front, we have this guy that's kind of centered, loops around just fine. But if we look over at this one, since we had it angled down, we have a good ring, and a partial ring. So let's look at this. So again, at this point, let's make this guy visible again. This guy was coming around, so again, there's no, oops, grab the correct one. There's no actual face or vertice right here. This is just where the two are intersecting. And since it's where they're intersecting, that's why it's causing these new vertices to pop up right here. So again, what this is going to do, it's going to give us a similar hole. If we just look at this from the side, let's go ahead and grab all these polygons. So select, look at it from the side, we can see it's the same thing, it's just kind of slightly angled down like we wanted. But let's look at this over here. Now we have this guy, toggle verts, he's going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So he's now an n-gon. Then we got a triangle, quad, 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 quad. So again, something like this, if we were going to finalize this mesh, we'd have to do what's called a cleanup process. So let's go ahead and look at this one first. So again, in some capacity, we're going to want to deal with this n-gon. Because again, if we tried to subdivide this is a problematic polygon, won't let me smooth the surface. If I select it, it's saying that this big huge n-gon is a problem. If I was going to unwrap, it could potentially cause problems. So ideally, what you can do is, if you want, you can work on it, or you can isolate it to where that's the only polygon selected. It's usually safer. But ideally, you can come in and kind of manually cut this up. So just selecting these, making sure they hit at 0 and 100%. And then I can grab these individual items, hold Shift, hit T, and that's going to triangulate them. So if you want, you can make it aesthetically pleasing and saying these are kind of the main poles, the top, right, left, and have them go to their corresponding corners. But realistically, something like this is fine. It's just this guy is super long and skinny, as opposed to if I rotate him over here, we get slightly more uniform distribution. So ideally, this is probably how I do it. What you'd want to avoid would be potentially this edge or this vertice connecting to this vertice and making kind of a filled in polygon right here. You want to make sure that this stays towards looking like a hole. So let's unhide that. Let's look over here. So let's just try to triangulate this and see what happens. Hold Shift, hit T. So again, it did a fairly good job. Ideally, that guy's pretty long and skinny. We might want to have him flip around, and again, to flip these, I'm just spinning the edge. So if I go over to edge here, I have an edge selected, I can hit spin right here, or little grayed out V. V is the hotkey to spin that guy. So again, I could find edges like this that are potentially coming at a really sharp angle. Oops. I need to select just one, because again, this is where that problem's coming in. If I zoom all the way in on this, I actually had two edges selected because they're so close. So this is a super long, skinny polygon. So if I zoom in, I can grab just that one, spin him, kind of go from there. So again, ideally you'd want to clean this up in some capacity, because now I can go ahead and smooth this, and then if need be, we could add our edge weighting, do whatever. See, we have edge weighting here. Grab this loop all the way around. So if I turn this off, what I'm realistically trying to grab is this loop where it meets the surface. So turn our smoothing on, edit our edge. So now it has that. And turn that guy off. So again, now we could have potentially a smooth capsule. We could go to surface, increase our subdivision level. Now we get something that's a little bit more smooth. And again, we're getting problems here because we have so many edges going to one. Do something like that, fixes it up. But regardless, turning that off, we're going to want to eliminate this as an n-gon, turn it into a series of quads and tries if we want to work with it. And the last thing I wanted to show with these subtraction booleans is you can have something complicated. So again, this is gonna, if we look at it from the side, it's going to kind of make a hole right here that kind of comes in. The tunnel's gonna go back and then go up. So let's see what happens when we do this. Select this guy, mesh edit, subtract from background, hit OK, and turn this guy off. So if we look at this, you can see it kind of goes in. If I go in there, I can look up. Let's do a quick grow expansion, and I can see that's in there, or I could just hide this and see that that complicated scenario has been cut out of the shape. So again, we can get really complicated modeling done in a very easy manner. So again, if you have a negative space like this, you can model it in a positive manner and then just go ahead and do a Boolean operation and get that complicated shape carved out of a more simple shape. So real quick, let's just demo the other types of Booleans real quick, and all of these should pretty much stay true in all the previous tasks we just discussed. So let's do a Boolean. Again, we've been doing subtract from background. Let's do a union. So again, we have a cube here, we have this cube here. The big one is the one that's selected. Hit OK, and turn this guy off, because remember, again, looking our effector, nothing is going to change with him. All the change is going to happen with our active mesh. So looking at this, let's see what happened. We had the cube that was right here, hit H to hide, and again, all the negative space, so let's unhide and turn him on, where these two were interacting, it just negates this. It cuts it off and just says, plunk, these two objects are now one. So if I double click, it grabs the whole piece. Also, if I was to grab this and move it, you can see it's attached. I could triangulate this, and it does it in a really goofy manner, so let's go ahead and manually triangulate that. So we have cut here to here, and again that's looking a little odd because this, and do it a few times, was again a big huge n-gon, so it doesn't really know how I want to handle the triangulation. So if I just manually triangulate it, I didn't do any welding. It did the welding for me, so again when I pull this out, it's all attached. So let's undo this and get back to our original cube, or again I could just do modeling operations, kind of remodel a cube. Let's bridge that together so we have box 1 and box 2. Let's make sure that both of them are visible. And let's do the other Boolean operations. So we did a union, did a subtraction, let's do an intersect. Hit OK. So again, this is kind of the opposite of that. Where our two objects were intersecting, it only leaves that amount. So let's do a different example of that so it'll make a little more sense. So doing a union with a little bit more complicated shape, let's grab him and just rotate him and put his top portion in the box. Cube is going to be our active mesh. So mesh edit, Boolean, oops, do intersect from background, hit OK. So now what it did was it pretty much, this much of the guy was inside of the box, and that's all that remains with its geo kind of untouched. It just gets sliced off in this area right here. So again, same guy, just sliced right where the box was. And going back to our box example, have the larger one selected, want to do an add, hit OK. Oops, turn the little mesh off. So now let's see what happened here. It appears as if this is the same as union, but again if I hide this, we can see the inside of the mesh is still there, whereas with the union when we did that, it was deleted like so. So again, not destructive, everything stays there, but if I double click, these vertices right here that got created are welded together. So again, it's all one piece. It just has this portion didn't get deleted, whereas a union would delete this. The add just adds the two together. Now moving on to more practical examples of using Booleans. With anything else in art, depending on how creative you get while using them, you're going to get kind of varied results. So this quick example, I have this little beveled wedge here. I have a bunch of floating spheres. Let's go ahead, mesh edit, Boolean. We're going to do a subtract from background, hit OK. Go ahead and turn this mesh off, and now we have kind of some Swiss cheese. So again, really simplified way of using this, but again, as soon as I look, again, this is going to be one big huge n-gon, and I can already see that there's problems kind of happening. So chances that I can just hit Shift T and everything's going to work aren't kind of the best. So again, this is something that geometry wise you might need to clean this up a little bit more, or again something like this, using those smoothing groups to your advantage, something like that. Let's go ahead and turn the wireframe off. Now we got better results going. So again, a lot of this stuff you can't just one and done use it and get amazing results. There's going to be some cleanup potentially required afterwards, or some more steps. Just like sculpting, you don't just use the make nose brush in most cases, but know that this is a powerful tool to use, but it's not a catch-all that will do all the work for you. So for this next example, what I'm going to do is I have guy here, box here. Let's go to the front view. I'm going to make this box really, really thin. Let's go ahead and make it really wide and long. Let's just give this kind of a random-ish angle. So again, our box has thickness. And for this, actually the subtract should work just fine. Turn this mesh off. So realistically what I just did was I cut him where this plane was. So about right here, just cut him in half. And again, that chopped off his arm as well. So I just want to turn him off, turn that on. So now I can grab this mesh, pull it down, and I have an intersection where this guy was just sliced. Same thing with his hand here. So now I have multiple pieces of a guy really, really quickly. Again, this is going to be an n-gon that I can potentially clean up in whatever way I want. Just depends on how much time I want to spend on it. Or I could extrude it. Oops. Do a join average. So I have one of those going. Doesn't really matter. But I can use Booleans to quickly cut a mesh up into multiple pieces if I need that for whatever reason. So practical use for this is if you had a pillar in a game and you needed to slice it up because, again, somebody cut it in half, or you just need a destruction state, so you just want to have it broken into a bunch of pieces, you could use Booleans to kind of accomplish that. So switching over and looking at just that example, we have our pseudo pillar here. This guy, which was just a sphere that kind of got flattened, and I literally just grabbed random verts, pulled them up, pushed them down to make kind of an inconsistent surface. Turn both of these on, grab our pillar, let's repeat that operation. Now I can drag him off to the side and look, and I have a crushed apart pillar that, again, I can now grab this, flip it over on its side, do whatever other thing. It's going back a few times. If I want it to look a little bit more kind of inconsistent right now, there's this edge that kind of goes around pretty flat. I could grab him, kind of pull him down in chunks, pull him up right here. Oops. Move that back a little bit. And depending on how varied I make my piece that's cutting it in half, is going to give me varied results as far as the profile of this, if I need it to be broken up into other pieces. The other thing would be if I use multiple ones, I could actually have little kind of chip islands that would be out and be just little rubble pieces laying on the ground. So another, again, just another way of intelligently using Booleans to help out a workflow. So another example, I just used this guy right here, this text tool, wrote out the word example, turned it into polygons, gave it some thickness. And again, we just have a box here, so I just need to grab these polygons. Let's go to a side view, make sure they're intersecting, something like that. And now I can fairly easily do the same operation. This one, again, we have slightly more complicated geo, so the Boolean is going to take a little bit longer. There we go. Let's go ahead and hide the text. Look at this. Now we have this guy, text, embossed into our surface. So again, just indented in a little bit. And again, if we wanted to get fancy, we could take this text and use the bend tool, make it round, put it around a cylinder, something like that. We could use this to kind of put stamping into metal. And again, that would be potentially good for a normal map to stamp something like this into it detail-wise, and then go ahead and bake that as far as the normal map goes. The only thing you want to definitely take into consideration is looking at this from the front, this edge being kind of parallel to this edge. We'd probably, let's go ahead and use this guy, it'll be a little bit easier. Potentially want to take this outside edge and just bevel it going across, because again, this being a flat surface, that being a flat surface, probably wouldn't bake super well. The other thing, we could just take our font and just add a bevel to this edge. So it adds that little bit of roundness, and that roundness right there is going to bake in just fine, as opposed to, again, this guy being flat surface, that looking left and right are perfectly parallel. But again, that goes back into the normal baking discussion. But again, just another way of using Booleans to help out get small, hard to model detail into a surface. So for this example, I'm going to use a couple new tools. We have our normal sphere. I have this little guy, it was just a default capsule. I'm going to actually do a radial array around. I'm just going to hover over here and select this point right here, right click. Now it's going to duplicate in a circle around that axis. We have, I think, 32 edges around here, so we're going to change that to half of 32, or 16. Now if I look at these two, I have kind of this guy sitting right on the edge. Let's actually grab every one of these. Look at this from the top. Turn snapping off. And rotate this around. About right there. Now we have these guys sitting in the middle of the polygon here. So again, this is one mesh, this is the other one. You can go ahead, go back to our mesh edit, do a Boolean, subtract from background, hit OK, turn this one off. Now we have a bunch of little holes in here. Again, usually working with circles, you can get kind of cool looking results fairly quickly. Grab the same set of geo, mirror it on the y-axis, hit OK. Now they're on the bottom. Go ahead and delete the ones on the top. Grab the ones on the bottom, do a Boolean, and do a union now. Hit OK, turn this one off. So again, now really quickly we have, again, a handful of n-gons to deal with, but a fairly cool looking surface that's all one contiguous mesh that we could now bake this onto a sphere. And again, all this information is going to show up. Go ahead and change the smoothing a little bit real quick. And again, this might be something that you'd want to manually change the smoothing on, but regardless, we get pretty cool results with not a lot of work. So again, Booleans are really, really powerful. You can use them in a huge variety of ways to get really complicated geo using primitive shapes or next to primitive shapes. Again, with anything like this, try to simplify it. Break your more complicated pieces into simpler pieces and use combinations of Booleans to kind of get the results you're looking for. So Booleans are a circumstantial tool that you won't use all the time, but when you do use them correctly, they're going to shave a bunch of time off of your workflow. So in just a few seconds, they can yield results that would otherwise take probably hours if you were going to try to model it by hand.